Grandmother's table a story about what cannot be taken. Her husband called the taxi himself. He did it at 11:38 p.m., standing in the kitchen of the house on Caldwell Ridge Road in Atlanta, Georgia, speaking in the same calm voice he used when he booked conference rooms and dinner reservations at the kind of steakhouse where the menu has no prices. Prices. He gave the address. He said the pick phone face down on the granite countertops. He hung up and set his phone fast on the granite counter, and when Taraji walked past him pulling her gray suitcase, 8 months pregnant, barefoot on the hardwood floor she had picked out herself, he did not look at her. He looked at the counter. The taxi arrived in 4 minutes. The driver was a young man with a phone mounted on his dashboard playing gospel music at low volume. He got out and opened the trunk. He did not ask questions. Taraji stood on the front steps with her suitcase and a plastic grocery bag, holding 3 maternity dresses and a manila folder she had tucked in at the last moment, brown and unmarked, wedged between the fabric like it was nothing. Marcus watched from the doorway, not with guilt, with calculation. He wanted a witness. He wanted someone to say later that she had loaded her own bag into her own taxi and left of her own free will. Taraji understood that the moment she saw the driver already waiting. She looked at Marcus for 3 seconds. He looked at the counter again. She walked down the front steps, felt the cold concrete on her bare feet, and stopped at the edge of the walkway. The driver had her suitcase in his hands. The gospel music was still playing, something low and certain about being led through water. She said, "I'll take it from here." She took the suitcase handle from him. She turned, and she walked away from the taxi, away from the house, away from the witness Marcus had carefully arranged. She walked because if she got in that car, the story became his. She was not going to let the story become his. She walked 9 blocks in October rain before she found a porch light still burning. The rain on Holcomb Bridge Avenue in Atlanta hit the pavement the way rain hits when it means it, not the polite kind that makes people open umbrellas, the kind that finds the gaps, the kind that soaks through a maternity dress in 40 seconds and stood on the porch of a house with moves with intention. Taraji stood on the porch of a house with cream-colored siding and a wind chime made of driftwood that knocked against itself in the dark. She knocked. She knocked. She waited. She knocked again. The woman who opened the door was in her late 60s. She had silver locks pinned up at the back of her head, deep brown skin, and reading glasses pushed up on her forehead like she had just set down a book. Her name was TARAJI Briggs. She wore a housecoat the color of old mustard and slippers that had seen too many winters. She looked at Taraji's belly, then at her bare feet on the cold concrete, then at the plastic bag in her right hand. "Come in," Dorothy May said. She did not ask a single question. She sat Taraji at the kitchen table. She put a dish towel around her shoulders and another over her feet. She filled a kettle and set it on the stove, and while the water heated, she stood with her back to Taraji and her hands moving through the cabinet with the practiced quiet of someone who has fed people in crisis before. The clock above the stove said 12:09 a.m. Taraji noticed something then. On Taraji's right wrist, there was no bracelet. She had taken it off before she left. A thin copper bangle, worn smooth at the edges, that her grandmother Celestine had given her the day she turned 16. She had slipped it off and tucked it into the front pocket of the plastic bag before Marcus could see it, before he could reach for it, before he could make it part of whatever exit scene he was staging. Dorothy May set a mug of ginger tea in front of her and sat down across the table. Then she looked at Taraji's wrist, at the pale ring of skin where the bracelet had lived for 12 years, and something shifted in Dorothy May's face. Not recognition exactly. More like the moment when you are almost certain of something and then certain. She stood up without speaking. She walked to the back bedroom. She came back carrying a small wooden box, the kind that might hold jewelry or letters or the particular things people cannot throw away. She set it on the table and opened the latch. Inside, wrapped in a piece of blue flannel, was a thin copper bangle, worn smooth at the edges, identical to the one in Taji's pocket. Taji stopped breathing. "Your grandmother?" Dorothy May said. "Worked for Keystone Property Group for 9 years. She was the best cook that company ever had. She left this behind in her locker in the basement when she moved back to Silver Spring." Dorothy May touched the bangle gently. She left a note with it. It said, "Give this to the woman who comes without it. She will know why." The rain hit the window. Taraji reached into the plastic bag. She pulled out the copper bangle from her pocket and set it on the table beside the one from the box. Two bracelets, made in the same hand, worn by the same woman at different points in her life. Celestine had owned two, and Taraji had never known. "My grandmother worked at Keystone," Taraji said. "For 9 years," Dorothy May said. 32 years before I started working there. I clean the floors and restrooms of the buildings they own. The man who manages those buildings now is the man who put you out tonight." The refrigerator hummed. Wind chime knocked outside. "His name is Marcus Webb," Dorothy May said. "And I have watched him in those hallways for 4 years. I know exactly what kind of man he is." In the morning, with sunlight coming through the kitchen window at an angle that made the scratched linoleum look almost warm, I told Dorothy May everything. She told her about the beginning, when she and Marcus had moved to Atlanta from Silver Spring with $9,000 between them and a plan that mostly depended on his salary catching up to their rent. She had worked as an office coordinator at a dental group on Peachtree Industrial Boulevard for 3 years, paying bills and packing lunches and typing his quarterly performance reviews because he said he worked better when he dictated and someone else organized. She told her about the years when his career at Keystone Property Group accelerated and hers stayed flat. Not because she lacked ambition, but because every time she mentioned a promotion or a new position, Marcus would bring up the cost of childcare or the importance of being available, or the fact that his schedule was already complicated. She had listened. She had adjusted. That was the first thing he took from her, the belief that her adjustments were choices. She told her about the house on Caldwell Ridge Road, which was in Marcus's name alone, which she had asked to be added to twice, which he had said he would look into. She told her about the joint savings account, which had held $41,000 in September and held $7,000 now. The difference having moved to a personal account at a different bank sometime in October when she was at her 32-week prenatal appointment. She told her about the woman named Bridget Calloway, who had appeared in their social life the way certain people appear, gradually and then completely. A colleague from Marcus's Southeast Division. She came to dinner once, then twice, then started arriving on Tuesday evenings and staying through Thursday. Her perfume, something with sandalwood underneath it, began appearing on the pillows and on the guest bathroom towels. Taraji had found a receipt in Marcus's jacket for a piece of jewelry she had never received, $4,400 from a boutique on Buckhead Avenue. When she asked, Marcus told her she was reading too much into things. That pregnancy made the mind work against itself, that she needed to trust what he told her rather than what she imagined. 3 weeks later, Bridget wore the necklace to a dinner party Marcus hosted in their home while Taraji stood in the kitchen carving a roast she had been preparing since noon. Bridget touched the pendant while making eye contact with Taraji across the room. She smiled. Not a mean smile, something worse. A smile that said she had been told this was already over. That was when Taraji understood that Marcus had been narrating a version of her life to Bridget for months. In that version, Taraji was already gone. She just hadn't been told yet. Last night, Marcus had told her. Dorothy May listened to all of it without moving. When Taraji finished, the kitchen was quiet. Then Dorothy May said, "He used your grandmother's name to steal from that company." Taraji looked at her. "The audit started last month," Dorothy May said. "I heard things. People in those buildings talk to the people who clean them because they forget we are there. There are fabricated vendor payments in the system. The name on several of those vendors is C. Briggs Catering Services." She paused. "Your grandmother's name was Celestine Briggs." The air in the kitchen changed temperature. Marcus had known Taraji's grandmother's name. He had heard the stories. He had sat at enough family dinners to know the name Celestine Briggs meant nothing to anyone at Keystone Property Group. That was precisely why he had used it. A ghost name. Untraceable. He had stolen from the company using the name of the woman who had cooked for that company with dignity for 9 years. Taraji pressed her palms flat on the table. She did not speak for a long time. Then she said, "She taught me to cook." Celestine Briggs had been born in 1947 in Savannah, Georgia, and had cooked professionally for 40 years before her hands began to slow. She had fed people the way some people pray, with complete attention, with the understanding that what you put in front of someone, in a moment of hunger or celebration or grief, is not just food. It is a statement about whether they matter. She had taught TARAJI in the kitchen of a small apartment in Silver Spring, Maryland from the time TARAJI was 7 years old, not with recipes written down, not at first, with presence, with the particular education of standing next to someone and watching their hands. The way the onion went into the oil only when the oil was ready, and the oil was ready when it moved a certain way, and you could only know that way by watching it 100 times until you knew it in your own hands. Celestine had died on a Thursday morning in January, a stroke in the kitchen, and TARAJI had stopped cooking the day of the funeral and had not started again. Not because she forgot. Because the kitchen reminded her of a woman she could not think about without her chest, doing something she did not have a name for. The skill was still in her hands the way a language you grew up speaking is still in your mouth even when you haven't used it in years. But she had not used it. She had buried it carefully and moved on. Now, standing at Dorothy May's stove at 7 in the morning, she turned on the burner. She did not make a decision. Her hands made it for her. She found oil in the cabinet, onions in the basket by the window, tomatoes on the counter. She found spices she recognized the way you recognize someone's voice before you see their face. She began to move through the kitchen the way Celestine had moved, not rushing, not measuring twice, tasting with her eyes closed. She made a pot of what her grandmother had called Sunday stew, a slow-cooked thing with smoked turkey and tomatoes and a spice combination that Celestine had assembled over 30 years of adjustments and had never fully written down. TARAJI had never made it alone, but her hands remembered the ratio of things, remembered the moment when you add the last ingredient and the smell of the pot changes from promising to inevitable. Dorothy May walked in from the living room and stopped in the doorway. She did not say anything. She sat at the table. TARAJI placed a bowl in front of her. Dorothy May took one spoonful. She set the spoon down. She looked at the table for a moment and then looked at TARAJI. "That," she said, "is your inheritance." Word moved through the neighborhood the way it moves in places where people still pay attention to each other. Dorothy May's neighbor, a retired schoolteacher named Vera Odom, came over the next afternoon and tasted what was left of the stew. She called her daughter. Her daughter called her prayer group at Cornerstone Baptist. The prayer group told the deacons. The deacons told the choir. Within 2 weeks, TARAJI was cooking 3 nights a week out of Dorothy May's kitchen. $14 a plate, cash. Pick up between 5 and 7. The orders, 19 plates the first week, 33 the second, 51 the third, 67 the fourth. She cooked every one of them standing at Dorothy May's stove, with her feet aching and her back pulling and the baby pressing against her ribs from the inside in a way that sometimes made her grip the counter and breathe until it passed. She cooked with Celestine's standard, which was not written anywhere, but which TARAJI heard in her grandmother's voice every time she picked up the spoon. Nothing leaves this kitchen unless it is the best thing that person will eat this week. By the end of the 4th week, she had made $3,820. She put every bill in the same wooden box that had held the copper bangle. She was 31 days from her due date. She had no car, no phone, no legal representation, no address in her name. But she had that money, those hands, and something Marcus had put in her suitcase by accident when he packed her out of the life she had built. The manila folder. She had tucked it in herself, at the last moment without thinking. But when she opened it in Dorothy May's kitchen the morning after she arrived, she understood that she had not tucked it in without thinking at all. She had tucked it in because Celestine had told her once, in a moment that had not seemed important at the time, to always keep her receipts. Not for taxes. For truth. Inside the folder was 7 years of paper. Grocery receipts for 41 client dinners she had shopped for and prepared and served and cleaned up after, paid from her personal checking account. Utility payment confirmations for 28 months when Marcus's salary was still growing. Car insurance payments she had made on the black Cadillac Escalade he now drove alone. 3 installment payments toward his MBA loans from Emory University. The security deposit check she had written on their first apartment in Decatur. Her W-2 forms from the dental group showing 3 consecutive years of income while Marcus built his career and told anyone who would listen that he had done it alone. Line by line, dollar by dollar, year by year. Everything she had given, documented, dated, with a paper trail. He had put it in her hands himself. 3 weeks before her due date, a social worker named Yvonne Carter found Taraji sitting in the waiting room of Piedmont Atlanta Hospital at 3 in the afternoon, wearing house slippers 2 sizes too large, no purse, no phone, no coat, her hands resting on her belly with the particular stillness of someone who has nowhere else to be. Yvonne sat down next to her. She asked her name. She asked her situation. Taraji told her, without tears, without performance, without raising her voice the way she had learned to tell it over the past weeks. Calm, sequential, each fact in its place. Yvonne made 2 phone calls from the hallway. The first got Taraji into an examination room in 20 minutes. The second was to a family law attorney named Sandra Okafor, who worked with a nonprofit called New Door Atlanta and had handled 53 cases of financial abuse and unlawful marital displacement in the past 4 years. Sandra had heard what Yvonne described and said she could be at the hospital in 40 minutes. She was there in 35. Sandra reviewed the manila folder the same evening. She turned each page slowly. She did not hurry. When she finished, she looked at Taraji over the top of her glasses and said, "This is not just a divorce case. This is evidence of a 7-year pattern of financial coercion. And if what Dorothy May told you about the vendor payments is accurate, it is also evidence of fraud." She paused. "We are going to file 3 motions. Within 72 hours. Sandra Okafor had filed a petition for emergency spousal support with the Fulton County Family Court, a motion to freeze all marital and transferred assets based on financial abuse and unlawful lockout during pregnancy, and a referral to the Keystone Property Group Compliance Office containing the names of the fraudulent vendor accounts. Marcus did not sit still. His attorney, a man named Jeffrey Pratt from a firm in Midtown, filed a counter-petition within 48 hours, claiming Taraji had left the marital home voluntarily and without cause. He attached a signed statement from the taxi driver who had arrived that night, confirming that a pregnant woman had gotten out of his cab 2 blocks from the pickup address and walked away on her own. But there was something Jeffrey Pratt had not considered. That the taxi driver's own statement said she had gotten out of his cab and walked away. It did not say she had been driven away from her home. It said she had chosen not to get in. Taraji had understood in the moment what she was doing. She had left a witness to her own refusal to be managed, and then Bridget Calloway made a phone call. Bridget Calloway was 31 years old. She had straight dark hair and a precise way of speaking that made her seem more certain than she usually was. She had believed what Marcus told her about Taraji because Marcus was convincing the particular way of men who have practiced their story until it sounds like memory. He had told Bridget that Taraji was emotionally unstable, that the marriage had been over for 2 years before Bridget ever appeared, that Taraji had become financially dependent by her own choices and was using the pregnancy as leverage to stay in a home she had no real claim to. Bridget had believed him. She had signed the statement his lawyer prepared without reading every line. But 6 weeks after Taraji left the house on Caldwell Ridge Road, Bridget found a folder in Marcus's home office while he was at a property meeting. She was not looking for anything. She was looking for a phone charger. The folder was in the desk drawer, and it was labeled with a woman's name she did not recognize. Inside were screenshots of text messages, a documented timeline, and a legal memorandum that made it clear Marcus had been seeing a 3rd woman for the past 8 months and had already begun the process of positioning Bridget as a short-term arrangement. She read every page. She sat in that office for 40 minutes. Then she picked up her phone and called Sandra Okafor's office. She did not ask for anything. She did not ask for forgiveness or an explanation or a conversation. She said, "I signed a statement that was not fully accurate. I would like to correct it." She gave Sandra 3 things: her willingness to testify, A photograph of the necklace Marcus had given her with the boutique receipt visible in the background, and the name of the third woman who would later confirm the same pattern. When Jeffrey Pratt learned that his key witness had withdrawn her statement, he filed a notice of withdrawal from the case the following Thursday and stopped returning Marcus's calls. The audit at Keystone Property Group took 11 days. The compliance team's accountants' work, pulling files without announcing them dates, checking vendor addresses against public records. The vendors were shells. The addresses were P-boxes. Shells. The work orders were for inspections that had never been conducted on days when Marcus was on the golf course at Chastain Park. The name TARAJI Briggs Catering Services appeared on 14 separate payment authorizations over 3 years. Total amount, $92,000. When the investigator traced the name, she found that no such company existed. No tax registration, no business license, no commercial kitchen permit. The name appeared to have been chosen for its obscurity, a family name connected to a former employee who had left the company 32 years ago and was now deceased. The investigator noted in her report that the selection of the name appeared deliberate. Marcus's corporate access badge stopped working on a Wednesday morning. He swiped it 4 times at the entrance of the Keystone Regional Office on West Peachtree Street. The security guard, a man named Dennis who had opened that door for Marcus every morning for 4 years, stepped forward and said 6 words. "Your access has been suspended, sir." Marcus looked at Dennis's face. He had walked past Dennis every single morning for 4 years and had never once asked his name. He saw something there that he did not have a word for. It was not hostility. It was not sympathy. It was simply the expression of someone who processes what is real and what is no longer real and adjusts accordingly. Marcus's hand dropped to his side. He understood in that moment not what he had done, not yet, but that the structures he had built around himself were moving without him. The badge, the title, the expense accounts, the property, they were running without him now. And they were running against him. By Friday, Keystone had suspended him without pay pending a full financial review. By the following Monday, his company laptop, phone, and parking pass had been collected from the house on Caldwell Ridge Road by a courier who did not make small talk. Wednesday, his attorney had withdrawn. By Thursday, Marcus was alone. The hearing was on a Tuesday morning in Courtroom 7 of the Fulton County Courthouse on Pryor Street. Sandra Okafor stood at the table on the left. Taraji sat behind her in a dress Dorothy May had pressed that morning. Marcus sat at the table on the right, alone. He had not shaved in 4 days. His suit was the charcoal one he wore when he wanted to project competence. It was doing less work than usual. Sandra presented the folder. She laid each document on the surface of the table one at a time, reading the amounts and dates in a voice that did not vary in pitch or speed. She did not perform outrage. She did not editorialize. She read the paper trail the way you read coordinates, each number pointing to the same location, each date confirming the same story. 41 client dinners, 28 months of utility bills, 4 years of insurance payments, 3 installments on his business school loans, 7 years of income she earned, while he told people he had built everything himself. The judge, a woman named Honorable Patricia Graves, who had been on the family court bench for 19 years, reviewed the folder for 14 minutes. She turned each page. She wrote notes. She did not look up. When she finished, she removed her reading glasses. She looked at Marcus. Then she looked at Taraji. Then she spoke. Emergency spousal support, $3,500 per month, effective immediately. Temporary exclusive possession of the marital home on Caldwell Ridge Road to Taraji, effective within 48 hours. A restraining order requiring Marcus to vacate. A full forensic audit of all marital assets and all transfers conducted in the prior 24 months. And a referral to the Fulton County District Attorney's Office regarding the fraudulent use of a deceased individual's name in the commission of corporate fraud. That last referral was the one Marcus had not anticipated. He sat in the courtroom for 8 minutes after the ruling. His hands were flat on the table. His jaw was tight. He was looking at a point on the wall that had nothing on it. The charcoal suit. The firm handshake that could make people feel like they were being let into a secret. None of it was running now. He had spent 14 months engineering her removal from his life. He had planned the bank transfers, and the lock changes, and the taxi, and the witness, and the signed statement, and the attorney, with the nice office on West Peachtree. He had been thorough about almost everything. He had not been thorough about the folder. He had packed it himself in those 10 minutes, shoved it between her dresses, because he did not know what it was, because he had never looked at a single page of it, because in 14 months of careful planning, he had never once examined the evidence of everything she had given him. He handed her the receipts himself. That night, sitting in a holding area while his attorney tried unsuccessfully to reach someone who would take his case, Marcus Webb thought about a Tuesday morning 11 years earlier, when he and TARAJI had stood in the kitchen of their first apartment in Decatur, and she had made him breakfast before his first day at Keystone. She had woken up before him. She had found things in a nearly empty refrigerator and made something from them. He had eaten it standing up, already thinking about the day ahead, and he had not said anything about it. He had not said anything about most of it. For 7 years, he had stood next to a woman who was building the foundation underneath him, and he had looked right past her at the horizon he was convinced was his alone to reach. He had been wrong about what he was standing on. That understanding arrived quietly, the way real things arrive, not as a revelation, as a weight. He sat with it because there was nothing else to do. 15 months later, on a Saturday morning in January, a restaurant opened on Auburn Avenue in Atlanta's old Fourth Ward neighborhood, 4 blocks from the birthplace of Martin Luther King, Jr. It was small, 32 seats, exposed brick walls on 2 sides, wide front windows that let the morning light in flat and golden, a kitchen with a pass-through window so that people sitting at the tables could see the fire and smell the food before it arrived. The name above the door was hand-lettered in clean black paint on a panel of reclaimed pine. It said, Celestine's. TARAJI stood in that kitchen at 6 in the morning with her daughter strapped to her chest in a woven cloth carrier. The baby's name was Elise Celestine Webb Briggs. She was 10 months old. She had her mother's eyes and her great-grandmother's name. She slept through the sound of onions hitting oil. She slept through the smell of smoked turkey and tomatoes and the particular spice combination that had no name on any label but that lived in TARAJI's hands, the way certain things live in hands and nowhere else. The first customer arrived at 7. It was Dorothy Mae Briggs, wearing her good coat on a Saturday, a burgundy wool coat with brass buttons that she saved for important occasions. She ordered the Sunday stew. She ate it slowly with a piece of cornbread she held in both hands. When the bowl was empty, she looked at TARAJI and said, Celestine would tell you it needed 2 more minutes on the heat. She smiled. She would also tell you it was the best thing she had eaten in 30 years. TARAJI laughed. It was the kind of laugh that happens before you can organize your face against it. The kind that comes from somewhere you had not expected to find still intact. By the 3rd month, Celestine's had a wait list on Friday and Saturday evenings and a line on Sunday mornings that started before the door unlocked. By the 6th month, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution ran a full feature in the food section. By the 9th month, TARAJI had hired 4 cooks and a front-of-house manager, and she was paying every one of them above the market rate for this city, with health coverage from day 1 and 2 guaranteed days off each week, no matter what the reservation list said. Dorothy Mae came every Wednesday at noon. She never paid. She sat at the same table by the front window, table 4, the one with the best view of Auburn Avenue. She never ordered from the menu. She said the same thing each time TARAJI approached with a plate. Surprise me. And every week, TARAJI surprised her. TARAJI also started a program she ran out of the restaurant kitchen on the 2nd Saturday of every month. She called it The Next Table. She hosted 4 women who were rebuilding after displacement, after abuse, after the kind of financial erasure that leaves a person standing in a hospital waiting room with no ID and no coat. She taught them to cook, not just technique, the standard. She said it the way Celestine had said it to her. Nothing leaves this kitchen unless it is the best thing that person will eat this week. 3 of those women started catering businesses within the first year. One of them, a woman named Vivian Reese, who had arrived at the first session with a bruise on her collarbone she had covered with a scarf, now supplies 2 corporate offices in Buckhead with weekly lunch service. She cooks a slow-braised chicken every Thursday that has a waiting list of its own. She learned it in Taraji's kitchen. She charges $20 a plate. Her daughter is in 2nd grade and draws pictures of a restaurant she says she will open one day. On the wall of Celestine's, beside the pass-through kitchen window, there is a framed photograph, black and white. A woman in a white apron standing in a commercial kitchen, hands on her hips, looking directly at the camera with the expression of someone who has made peace with exactly who they are and would like the camera to know it. Below the photograph, a small brass plate with black lettering. Celestine Briggs, 1947 to 2013. She fed everyone. She forgot no one. Marcus Webb was charged with 3 counts of felony fraud in connection with the fabricated vendor payments. He pleaded guilty in exchange for a reduced sentence, 2 years of probation, full restitution of $92,000 to Keystone Property Group, and the permanent revocation of his Georgia real estate license. His name appeared in a public disciplinary filing with the Georgia Real Estate Commission. 4 of his former professional contacts ended their association within 60 days of the filing. He lost the house on Caldwell Ridge Road in the marital settlement. He moved into a 1-bedroom apartment in Smyrna. Bridget Calloway relocated to Charlotte. She did not leave a forwarding address. TARAJI never called Marcus. She never texted him. She never mentioned his name in any interview she gave or any conversation she had in public. She did not need to. The court documents said what needed to be said. The restaurant said the rest. And on the morning of the sentencing, Marcus sat in the courtroom and heard his own choices read back to him in the language of a court record, which is the most unforgiving language there is because it does not editorialize, and it does not explain, and it only states what happened and when and what it cost. He heard the name Celestine Briggs read aloud in that courtroom as a victim of fraud. A woman who had cooked for his company with her whole self, who had left behind a copper bangle and a note and a set of skills she had transferred to a granddaughter she loved more than anyone would ever know, and whose name Marcus had borrowed without permission to build a hidden account. He sat very still when he heard her name. It was the first time in the entire proceeding that he looked like he understood the full weight of what he had done. Not the legal weight, the human weight. He had reached past death to use a woman as a tool, a woman who had given the best of herself to people who did not see her, and whose granddaughter had survived because of what she left behind. He had not understood until that moment what he had been standing on. Every Wednesday at noon, 2 women sit at table 4 by the front window of a restaurant on Auburn Avenue in Atlanta. One of them is in her late 60s with silver locks and a coat she saves for occasions. The other is in her mid-30s with warm brown eyes and the particular stillness of someone who has learned that patience is not the same as surrender. They do not always talk. Sometimes they just sit together while the kitchen sounds come through the pass-through window. The oil, the onion, the low sound of something slow cooking, the smell of a kitchen where nothing is rushed and nothing is wasted and everything is made with understanding that the person who eats it deserves the best you can offer. Outside on Auburn Avenue, people walk past the front window. Some of them look in and see 2 women sitting at a table in the warm light of a restaurant with a name painted above the door. Some of them stop and read the name. Some of them come inside. They are always fed well. That is the promise. That has always been the promise. And no one, not a man with a tailored suit and a careful plan, not a legal system that almost believed the wrong version, not 14 months of deliberate erasure, had been able to touch it. Because some things live in the hands, and what lives in the hands cannot be locked out or transferred or packed into a gray suitcase in 10 angry minutes. It just waits, and when the time comes, it rises. TARAJI Briggs was never the burden he called her. She was the foundation, and foundations do not disappear when someone turns off the porch light. They wait for morning, and then they feed everyone.